Meet Sarah, 36 years old, a marketing executive. Smart, driven, the kind of person who color codes her calendar, then apologizes for being behind anyway. A friend recommends intermittent fasting. It changed my life. A podcast agrees, then another. Soon, every algorithm seems convinced breakfast is optional. And longevity begins exactly 16 hours after your last bite. So Sarah gives it a try. At first, it feels fantastic. She stops mindless snacking. Her calorie intake naturally decreases. A few pounds disappear. Her mornings feel surprisingly focused. Clinical research suggests this isn't unusual. For many people, intermittent fasting can improve appetite regulation, insulin sensitivity, and several markers of metabolic health. So naturally, Sarah reaches the conclusion most of us would. I finally found the answer. Then life happens. A demanding project, late night deadlines, 8 hours of sleep quietly becomes 6, then 5. Her workouts get harder. The coffee gets stronger. Recovery gets weaker. Yet every morning she keeps fasting because disciplined people don't quit, right? A few weeks later, something changes. Nothing dramatic, nothing that sends her rushing to the emergency room. Just small signals. Morning workouts feel heavier. Recovery takes longer. Her hands seem colder than usual. By mid-afternoon, her focus isn't quite as sharp. They're subtle changes, the kind most people dismiss, not because they're meaningless, but because they're easy to explain away, until they keep showing up. So Sarah schedules a visit with her physician. She expects one question: how many hours are you fasting? Instead, she hears something completely different. Tell me about your sleep. How much are you eating overall? How stressful has work been lately? Sarah pauses. I thought fasting was the important part. Her physician smiles. It matters, but it's only one variable. Your body is solving a much larger equation. That single sentence changes everything, because biology never evaluates one habit in isolation. It evaluates the environment surrounding that habit. Let's shrink ourselves down. Smaller than a grain of rice. Smaller than a single cell. Welcome to Mission Control. Our first stop, the brain. Forget the motivational quotes. Forget the discipline speeches. Your brain is an economist. Every second, it's balancing an enormous biological budget. How much energy is available? How much is being spent? How much should be saved? Can we afford growth? Or should we temporarily prioritize conservation? This isn't fear, it's resource management. Your brain doesn't throw a tantrum because you skipped breakfast. It updates the spreadsheet. Next, we visit the liver. If the brain is the chief economist, the liver is the emergency warehouse manager. Breakfast didn't arrive? No problem. Open glycogen storage. Release glucose. Help stabilize blood sugar. Keep the lights on quietly, efficiently, without demanding applause. Honestly, your liver deserves the Employee of the Century award. Instead, the credit usually goes to whichever smoothie is trending this week. That's a little like congratulating the delivery truck while ignoring the entire power plant. Now let's meet cortisol, or cortisol. No hormone has suffered worse public relations. Mention its name online and people react as if it just robbed a bank. Reality is far less dramatic and far more interesting. Cortisol is one of your essential stress response hormones. It helps coordinate energy availability. It supports blood glucose regulation. It naturally rises in the morning as part of a healthy circadian rhythm, helping you wake up and become alert. Without cortisol, getting out of bed would be considerably less exciting. The problem isn't cortisol. The problem is when your body is trying to juggle too many stressors at once. Poor sleep, psychological stress, illness, heavy training, insufficient recovery, too little energy intake. Under those conditions, fasting may simply become one more variable inside an already crowded equation. Notice the difference? That's context, not catastrophe. Now let's visit the thyroid. The internet often treats it like a stubborn little switch that randomly decides whether you'll feel energetic. Reality is much more elegant. Think of it as your body's thermostat. Not lazy, not broken, strategic. It continuously integrates information from the brain, nutrient availability, hormonal signals, illness, and overall energy status. If conditions change, it adapts, not to sabotage you, to help keep the system functioning. That's what healthy physiology does. Finally, we arrive at the intestine, the customs checkpoint. Every day, millions of molecules line up for inspection. Some are welcomed inside. Others are turned away. The intestinal barrier is a dynamic living system, constantly renewing itself with support from adequate nutrition, healthy blood flow, immune regulation, and countless cellular processes working around the clock. You'll often hear dramatic claims that intermittent fasting routinely causes, quote, leaky gut. Current scientific evidence doesn't support that conclusion for a typical 16 to 8 fasting pattern. Researchers continue studying how fasting influences the gut, the microbiome, circadian rhythms, and intestinal physiology. The answers appear to depend on the individual, the overall diet, health status, and the specific fasting strategy being used. In other words, science refuses to become clickbait. Inconvenient for social media, wonderful for reality. As Sarah begins understanding all of this, something unexpected happens. She stops asking, is fasting good or bad? Instead, she asks, what is my body adapting to? That is a far more intelligent question, because your body isn't fighting your fasting schedule. It isn't secretly trying to sabotage your goals. It's responding to every signal you give it. Every meal, every workout, every stressful meeting, every night of sleep you traded for one more email. Your metabolism isn't reading the timer on your phone. It's reading the story of your life. And that changes everything. Meet Sarah, 42 years old, a marketing executive, busy, disciplined, the kind of person who color codes her calendar and still apologizes for being, quote, unproductive. A friend introduces her to intermittent fasting. 16-8, they say. It's effortless. The science is incredible. Your body finally learns to burn fat. Sarah loves the idea. No complicated recipes, no calorie counting, no endless lists of forbidden foods. Just wait. The first week feels surprisingly easy. Morning coffee replaces breakfast. Lunch somehow tastes better. A few pounds disappear. She feels victorious. By the second month, fasting becomes more than a habit. It becomes part of her identity. She isn't just someone who skips breakfast. She's disciplined, optimized. The kind of person who does what everyone else keeps saying they'll start on Monday. Then something subtle changes. She wakes up tired. Afternoon meetings become harder to concentrate through. Her workouts feel heavier. Her hands seem colder than everyone else's. Dinner suddenly becomes enormous. Not because she's weak, because she's genuinely hungry, really hungry. But she ignores the signals. After all, the fasting app congratulates her every morning. Surely the app knows best, right? Then, during a routine appointment, her physician asks a surprisingly simple question. Not, how long do you fast? Instead, how have you been feeling? Sarah hesitates. Nobody online had asked that. She talks about the fatigue, the constant thoughts about food, the cold hands, the slower recovery, the workouts that no longer feel the same. Her physician listens, then quietly says something that changes the entire conversation. Your body doesn't care whether a fasting schedule is popular. It only cares whether the strategy matches your physiology. That single sentence changes everything, because biology has never followed trends. Let's shrink ourselves down, smaller than a grain of rice, small enough to step inside Sarah's body. Our first stop, the intestine. Imagine one of the busiest international border crossings on Earth. Millions of arrivals every minute. Proteins, fats, carbohydrates, vitamins, minerals. Every molecule is inspected, sorted, directed. Nothing gets a free pass because it was labeled a superfood. The intestinal lining isn't simply a digestive tube. It's one of the body's most sophisticated biological barriers. Just one layer of cells separates everything inside your digestive tract from your bloodstream. An astonishing amount of responsibility for something only one cell thick. Those cells are connected by microscopic structures known as tight junctions. Think of them as intelligent security gates, not concrete walls, not wide open doors. Dynamic checkpoints, opening when appropriate, closing when necessary, constantly adjusting to changing conditions. Contrary to dramatic headlines, your intestine isn't either perfectly sealed or hopelessly leaking. Barrier function exists on a spectrum. It can be influenced by infections, certain diseases, nutrition, sleep, physical stress, medications, and many other factors researchers are still working to understand. The phrase leaky gut gets thrown around online as though it's the explanation for nearly every health problem imaginable. Reality is considerably more nuanced. Increased intestinal permeability is a genuine physiological phenomenon. Scientists study it extensively, but current evidence does not support the claim that a typical 16 to 8 fasting routine routinely causes it. And it certainly isn't the universal explanation for every unexplained symptom discussed on social media. Science rarely rewards simple answers. It rewards accurate ones. Now let's visit another extraordinary organ, the liver, your 24-hour biochemical logistics manager. When fasting begins, the liver doesn't panic. It adapts. First, it releases stored glycogen to help maintain blood glucose. As those stores gradually decline, it increases glucose production through gluconeogenesis. With longer periods of fasting, ketone production also rises. None of this is evidence that your body is malfunctioning. It's evidence that your metabolism is remarkably flexible. Evolution rehearsed this routine for millions of years before refrigerators, grocery stores, or food delivery apps existed. Your liver doesn't recognize intermittent fasting as a wellness trend. It recognizes an energy management problem. And solving energy management problems is exactly what it evolved to do. Now move deeper into your muscles. Thousands of tiny fuel warehouses. They don't hate carbohydrates. They don't worship fat. They're refreshingly free of internet arguments. They simply use whichever fuel best fits the demands of the moment. Walking, lifting weights, sleeping, sprinting, different activities, different energy requirements. Metabolism isn't loyal to one fuel source. It's practical, efficient, exceptionally adaptable. Now let's zoom even further into one of biology's greatest engineering achievements, mitochondria. Tiny structures inside nearly every cell, often called the powerhouses of the cell. An oversimplification, but a useful starting point. These microscopic organelles convert nutrients into usable energy through an astonishing network of coordinated biochemical reactions. They don't count fasting hours. They don't celebrate 16-8. They don't award bonus points for discipline. They respond to signals, nutrient availability, hormonal communication, physical activity, sleep quality, inflammation, thyroid hormones, stress, the entire biological environment. That's why current scientific evidence does not support the claim that intermittent fasting directly, quote, paralyzes thyroid mitochondria. The relationship is far more sophisticated than that. Prolonged calorie restriction, inadequate energy intake, or sustained physiological stress can influence thyroid hormone regulation in some individuals. But those responses depend on the broader physiological context, not simply on the existence of a fasting window. Your body isn't asking, are you fasting? It's asking, do I have enough energy? Do I have enough nutrients? Do I have enough recovery? Can I safely adapt? That distinction changes everything because cells don't recognize dietary philosophies. They recognize chemistry, signals, energy availability, recovery. And that means the most important question isn't whether intermittent fasting is good or bad. It's whether your version of intermittent fasting is supporting the biology you actually have instead of the biology you wish you had. The protocol hasn't changed. 16 hours, the same app, the same empty breakfast table, the same coffee. But everything we've explored so far is only half the story. Most people believe fasting changes metabolism. And yes, it absolutely can. But here's the twist almost nobody sees coming. Your metabolism changes the way you experience fasting just as much as fasting changes your metabolism. Let that sink in for a second, because that single idea quietly dismantles one of the biggest myths in modern biohacking. Imagine two people stepping onto identical treadmills. Same workout, same speed, same duration. One slept 8.5 hours. The other slept 4. One is well-fed, fully recovered and relatively stress-free. The other is buried under deadlines, training hard 6 days a week, and unintentionally under eating. Same workout, completely different biology. Nobody finds that surprising. Yet somehow we expect one fasting schedule to produce identical results in millions of completely different human beings. That's like expecting every plant on Earth to flourish with exactly the same amount of sunlight, water, and fertilizer. Nature has never worked that way. Neither has your metabolism. Let's step inside your body's control room. At the center sits your brain, not as a motivational speaker, as an economist. Every second, it asks one relentless question. How much energy do we actually have? Not how disciplined is this person? Not did they earn today's fasting badge? Just energy, availability, resources, risk. Because survival has always been an accounting problem. If yesterday included enough calories, quality sleep, manageable stress, and adequate recovery, your body may glide through a fasting window with remarkable ease. Stored glycogen supplies fuel. Fat oxidation gradually increases. Hormonal signals coordinate beautifully. For many people, energy stays steady. Snacking naturally decreases. Healthy eating becomes easier to maintain. That's one reason clinical research has found meaningful benefits from intermittent fasting in many individuals. Now change the environment. The fasting schedule stays exactly the same. The biology doesn't. You've been sleeping poorly for 2 weeks. Work deadlines keep piling up. Your workouts have become more intense. Without realizing it, your calorie intake has drifted below what your body actually needs. Life feels like juggling flaming chainsaws, except the chainsaws keep sending calendar invites. Now your brain opens the books again. The numbers look different. Conserving energy suddenly becomes a much higher priority. Not because fasting is quote unquote bad, because adaptation has always been context dependent. Your liver notices the shift almost immediately. Think of it as the emergency warehouse manager. Early in a fast, it releases stored glycogen to help maintain blood glucose. As those reserves gradually decline, the body increasingly relies on other pathways, including making new glucose from non-carbohydrate sources and using more fat-derived fuel. This isn't a crisis. It's normal physiology, elegant physiology, not panic, not catastrophe, adaptation. Meanwhile, another familiar character quietly enters the conversation. Cortisol, or cortisol. Few hormones have suffered worse public relations. According to the internet, it's apparently responsible for everything from belly fat to bad hair days to Mercury being in retrograde. Reality, as usual, is much more interesting. Cortisol isn't your enemy. It's one of your body's essential stress response hormones. During fasting, it helps maintain blood glucose and coordinate energy availability. Without it, handling metabolic challenges would be considerably harder. The problem isn't that cortisol exists. The problem is when your entire life becomes one long, uninterrupted stress notification. Poor sleep, psychological pressure, illness, excessive training, chronic undereating. Those factors can influence cortisol regulation far more profoundly than simply delaying breakfast. See the difference? Biology never isolates one variable. Marketing almost always does. Now let's visit your thyroid. Perhaps the most misunderstood employee in the entire metabolic company. People often imagine it as a stubborn manager refusing to approve weight loss. Reality is far more elegant. Think of it as an adaptive thermostat. It continuously receives information from the brain, nutritional status, hormones, illness, environmental conditions, and overall energy availability. Then it adjusts accordingly. Not emotionally, strategically. If energy remains consistently scarce over time, the body may reduce energy expenditure as part of a broader adaptive response. Scientists often describe aspects of this process as adaptive thermogenesis. Your metabolism isn't betraying you. It's protecting you, quite literally increasing the odds that you survive periods of limited energy. Evolution wasn't preparing you for swimsuit season. It was preparing you for unpredictable food availability. Those are very different objectives. Here's where social media often oversimplifies the story. You may hear dramatic claims that a standard 16-8 fasting routine destroys thyroid mitochondria or routinely causes hypothyroidism. Current scientific evidence simply doesn't support those conclusions. Could prolonged energy deficiency influence thyroid hormone regulation in some individuals? Absolutely. Can severe calorie restriction, chronic illness, overtraining, or sustained physiological stress affect endocrine function? Yes. Those are well-established areas of scientific research. But that's a very different statement from claiming that a properly implemented 16-8 fasting schedule automatically damages thyroid function in otherwise healthy people. Context matters. Again, notice how biology keeps repeating the same lesson. Now let's move to another remarkable organ, your intestine. Social media loves talking about leaky gut, sometimes responsibly, sometimes with roughly the scientific precision of a fortune cookie. Intestinal permeability is a real physiological phenomenon. Researchers study it extensively. The intestinal barrier is dynamic, highly regulated, and influenced by infections, inflammatory conditions, medications, alcohol, dietary patterns, severe physiological stress, and certain diseases. But current evidence does not demonstrate that a typical intermittent fasting schedule routinely causes increased intestinal permeability in healthy people. In fact, researchers continue investigating how meal timing, circadian rhythms, the gut microbiome, and fasting interact in complex and sometimes surprisingly beneficial ways. Science hasn't answered every question yet, and that's exactly why absolute certainty should make you slightly suspicious. Real science is comfortable saying, we know this, we're still studying that. Influencers, not always so much. Here's the moment that changes the entire conversation. The fasting timer measures hours. Your body measures conditions. The app celebrates 16 hours. Your physiology asks, how was your sleep? What was yesterday's calorie intake? How hard was today's workout? What's happening with inflammation? Are nutrients sufficient? Is recovery keeping up? Those questions determine far more than the clock ever will. Because metabolism isn't following a schedule, it's interpreting an environment. And once you truly understand that, you stop asking whether fasting is universally good or universally bad. Instead, you ask a far more intelligent question. What kind of biological environment am I asking this fasting protocol to enter? That's the question biology has been trying to answer all along. Now the real collision begins. Not between breakfast and fasting, between ideology and physiology. Because the internet loves certainty. Biology, not so much. Let's start with one of the loudest claims. Everyone should practice intermittent fasting. Everyone? That's a fascinating word. Imagine telling every person on earth to wear the exact same shoe size. Some people would feel amazing. Others wouldn't make it across the parking lot. Human metabolism works much the same way. Age differs. Genetics differ. Body composition differs. Training volume differs. Medical history differs. Sleep differs. Hormones differ, stress differs, yet somehow one eating schedule is supposed to fit everyone. That's not personalized health, that's nutritional photocopying. Here's another favorite. Hunger means healing. Sometimes, maybe. Sometimes hunger simply reflects normal physiology while your body adjusts. Sometimes it reflects an energy deficit. Sometimes it's driven by poor sleep. Sometimes by psychological stress. Sometimes by habit. Sometimes by hormones that regulate appetite. Context determines the meaning, not the sensation itself. If every growling stomach automatically signaled profound healing, teenagers who sleep until noon would have solved modern medicine years ago. Your body isn't writing poetry with every hunger pang. Most of the time, it's simply sending information. Learning to interpret that information is far more valuable than worshiping it. Now let's tackle another seductive idea. The longer you fast, the faster your metabolism becomes. Wonderful headline, terrible oversimplification. Your metabolism isn't a light switch. It's a negotiation. When energy intake matches your needs, recovery is adequate, sleep is sufficient, and fasting fits your physiology, your body may adapt remarkably well. Many people experience better appetite regulation, improved adherence to healthy eating, favorable metabolic changes. Clinical studies support that these outcomes can occur, but push the system beyond what your current biology can comfortably support, and the conversation changes. Recovery begins competing with energy conservation. Training quality may decline, performance can suffer. Some people notice persistent fatigue, irritability, constant hunger, difficulty maintaining muscle mass if overall nutrition becomes inadequate. Not because fasting itself is evil, because recovery is expensive. And your metabolism is an accountant. Eventually, accountants notice when the numbers stop adding up. Here's something wellness culture rarely celebrates. Recovery is productive. Sleep isn't laziness. Eating enough isn't weakness. Taking a rest day isn't failure. Some of your body's most extraordinary work happens while you're recovering. Proteins are synthesized. Damaged tissues are repaired. Hormonal rhythms are coordinated. Immune cells communicate. The nervous system recalibrates. Memories consolidate. Energy reserves are restored. Recovery isn't the opposite of progress. Recovery is one of the engines that makes progress possible. Imagine renovating a house. You can't spend every hour swinging a hammer. Eventually, someone has to deliver materials, replace the wiring, install the plumbing, clean up the construction site. Otherwise, you're just creating a very enthusiastic pile of debris. Your body follows the same principle. Stress creates the opportunity for adaptation. Recovery completes it. Now let's talk about one of my favorite victims of internet mythology, the thyroid. Poor thing. It gets blamed for almost everything. Weight plateau? Must be the thyroid. Feeling tired? Obviously the thyroid. Lost your car keys? Let's not rule out the thyroid just yet. Reality is considerably less dramatic and far more fascinating. Thyroid physiology is extraordinarily sophisticated. It responds to signals from the brain, energy availability, illness, temperature, hormonal communication, nutritional status, and countless interacting physiological inputs. It doesn't wake up every morning asking, did we complete 16 hours today? It asks, what kind of environment are we operating in? That's a much smarter question. And it's exactly the question you should be asking too. Here's another distinction worth remembering. Intermittent fasting is a tool, not an identity, not a personality trait, not a moral achievement. Some people accidentally turn meal timing into a competitive sport. My eating window is shorter than yours. Congratulations. Your stopwatch is deeply impressed. Your cells couldn't care less. They care about nutrient availability, energy balance, adequate protein, micronutrients, sleep, physical activity, circadian alignment. Those variables influence your physiology far more than winning the imaginary fasting Olympics. Now let's revisit cortisol one last time. People hear the word stress and assume every increase in cortisol is automatically harmful. That's like assuming every increase in heart rate means something is wrong. Run up a flight of stairs. Your heart rate rises. Normal adaptation. Lift heavy weights. It rises again. Still adaptation. Walk onto a stage to give an important presentation. Cortisol rises. Also adaptation. The question isn't whether cortisol changes. Healthy physiology expects it to. The real question is whether your body has the opportunity to return to balance afterward. Short-term stress is part of being alive. Chronic unresolved stress is an entirely different biological conversation. That's why sleep quality, psychological well-being, nutrition, social connection, and recovery matter so profoundly. They create the environment in which every fasting protocol succeeds or struggles. Here's a question almost nobody asks. What if your fasting experience changed, not because the protocol changed, but because you did? Maybe work became more demanding. Maybe your training intensified. Maybe you had a newborn. Maybe menopause changed your hormonal physiology. Maybe illness altered your energy requirements. Maybe getting older simply changed your recovery capacity. Life evolves. Your biology evolves with it. Your nutrition should be allowed to evolve too. Rigid rules rarely outperform intelligent adaptation. And that brings us to one of the greatest misunderstandings in modern health. People chase metabolic perfection. Your body is chasing metabolic resilience. Those are completely different goals. Perfection demands complete control. Resilience prepares you to function well despite imperfect conditions. Evolution chose resilience every single time. So perhaps the real question was never, should everyone follow 16.8? Perhaps the better question has always been, when does this tool support my physiology? And when is my physiology asking for something different? That's the difference between following a protocol and understanding biology, because your metabolism has never been trying to sabotage you. It has been trying to protect you every single day of your life. And once you stop fighting that remarkable system, you can finally start working with it instead. The kitchen is exactly the same. The coffee is still warm. The breakfast table is still quiet. Your fasting app still displays the same familiar timer. Nothing in the room has changed. Only the way you're looking at it has. At the beginning of this journey, that timer looked like the ultimate judge of metabolic success. 16 hours, mission accomplished. A tiny digital trophy for your discipline. Now, it looks very different because the timer was never measuring the variable that mattered most. It measured time. Your body measured something else entirely. Energy availability, sleep quality, recovery, hormonal signals, psychological stress, nutritional adequacy, circadian timing, the clock counted hours. Your physiology counted conditions. Those are not the same thing. If there's one lesson biology keeps whispering while the internet keeps shouting over it, it's this. Your metabolism doesn't reward obedience. It rewards adaptation. That's how humans survived ice ages, famines, seasonal food shortages, long migrations, illness, injury, constantly changing environments. Evolution never designed one perfect eating schedule. It designed extraordinary flexibility, the remarkable ability to adjust when circumstances change. That's why intermittent fasting can be genuinely helpful for many people. It can simplify eating, reduce unnecessary snacking, improve adherence to appropriate calorie intake, support metabolic health. Clinical research has demonstrated meaningful benefits in many individuals. But notice those words, many individuals. Not everyone, not every situation, not forever, because tools don't create health. They support health when they're matched to the right circumstances. A hammer is an excellent tool, unless you're trying to tighten a screw. The problem isn't the hammer. It's assuming every problem is a nail. Intermittent fasting deserves exactly the same respect, not worship, not fear, respect. Use it when it supports your physiology. Adjust it when your physiology changes. Let go of the idea that consistency means never adapting. Sometimes the healthiest decision is staying with your routine. Sometimes it's eating breakfast after a week of terrible sleep. Sometimes it's shortening your fasting window during periods of intense training. Sometimes it's working with a physician or a registered dietitian because an underlying medical condition changes the entire equation. Flexibility isn't failure. It's intelligent physiology. Think back to Sarah. Nothing magical happened when her fasting routine stopped feeling effortless. Her body wasn't betraying her. It was communicating. The protocol stayed exactly the same. Her biological environment didn't. The moment she stopped trying to beat an imaginary clock and started listening to her physiology, everything changed. Not because she became less disciplined, because she became more observant. And observation has always been one of science's greatest strengths. Curiosity asks better questions than certainty ever can. Instead of asking, how long should everyone fast? Ask, what is my body telling me right now? Instead of asking, how can I push harder? Ask, what conditions allow my metabolism to perform at its best? Those questions don't fit neatly into social media captions. They're far too intelligent for that. But your cells have been answering them every second of your life. Your brain continuously evaluates energy. Your liver manages fuel supplies. Your pancreas helps regulate blood glucose. Your thyroid adjusts metabolic priorities. Your muscles adapt to training. Your gut responds to nutrition, circadian rhythms, and countless physiological signals. None of them are competing for internet approval. They're cooperating quietly, relentlessly, brilliantly. Perhaps that's the greatest misconception modern wellness has created. We've started treating biology like software. Install one protocol, update one habit, optimize one variable, expect universal results. But biology has never been software. It's an ecosystem. Every part influences every other part. Sleep influences appetite. Stress influences recovery. Movement influences insulin sensitivity. Nutrition influences adaptation. Circadian rhythms influence hormonal regulation. Everything is connected. And ecosystems don't thrive because of one perfect rule. They thrive because of balance. So if you've spent years chasing the perfect fasting schedule, don't feel embarrassed. Almost all of us have searched for simple answers to wonderfully complex questions. There's something deeply comforting about believing one habit can solve everything. Reality is less convenient and far more inspiring. You are not being kept healthy by one eating window. You're being kept healthy by trillions of cells continuously communicating, adapting, repairing, and recalibrating every moment of every day. That remarkable system deserves far more of your trust than any viral trend ever will. Remember the timer that greeted you this morning. At first, it represented discipline. Now, it represents perspective. Because the healthiest metabolism isn't the one that obeys a stopwatch with military precision. It's the one supported by adequate nutrition, restorative sleep, intelligent movement, effective recovery, psychological resilience, and the flexibility to adapt when life changes. Your metabolism doesn't become healthier because you reach 16 hours. It becomes healthier because you consistently create the biological environment it evolved to thrive in. If you'd like to move beyond internet myths and learn how to evaluate intermittent fasting through physiology rather than popularity, join our community and download the Metabolic Flexibility Blueprint. Together, we'll explore evidence-based fasting strategies, how to recognize whether fasting truly fits your biology, practical ways to support metabolic health, thyroid physiology, recovery, circadian rhythms, and the science behind sustainable nutrition without the hype. Because the most powerful biohack you'll ever discover is realizing that your body has never been asking you to win against the clock. It has only been asking you to work with biology instead of against it.